Okay, class, today we're going to be talking about another part of speech. This past couple weeks we've been working on different parts of speech, and we know we've went over nouns, we've gone over adjectives, and we've gone over verbs. Today we're going to be looking at adverbs right here. So we're going to go ahead and let's read our objective aloud. Students will be able to recognize adverbs and their different types. Okay, in our language objective, we'll read those two as well. We'll start with number 1. Orally define adverbs, and number 2, explain orally and in writing why we use adverbs. Okay, so I went ahead and do this little diagram here because I wanted you to look at it and tell me your observations. Julio, what do you see in the word adverbs? Good, you see this component here which consists of the word verb. Okay, so you think maybe that might have a connection to verbs? Okay, good, we'll go ahead and we'll see. What about you, Sophia? What else do you see? Good. It's also separated here between the two letters ad. What other parts of speech is kind of similar to that? What do you think? Somebody help her out. Okay, good. Steven. Ad is kind of like an adjectives, right? They both start off with the same thing. And so what do we know about adjectives? Adjectives describe. Good job. What do adjectives describe? Nouns. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so we do know, now we can kind of get a little idea of what we think it might mean because we have verbs and then we have this here that says add, so it might be maybe describing verbs. I don't know, we'll see. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into our examples, and I went ahead and in the sentence have highlighted our adverbs. Okay, and let's see if we can maybe come up with a definition or an idea of what it means. So I'm gonna go ahead, let me scoot this down just a little bit. It says Santos quickly ran home. Okay, so let's break this down just a little bit. We know that Santos is our what? Our pronoun, okay? Because it's an actual name, you have to capitalize it, and it's the subject of our sentence. Let's see, we also have another noun here at the very end, but this is just a regular noun. It's just a label. It's not necessarily needs to be capitalized or doesn't have a name, so we're just gonna leave it just like that. Okay, so what else we have in the sentence? Can somebody tell me? Good job. We have ran here, which is our verb. And I use the color green for our verb because when you're at a stoplight, when do you go? When the light's green. And what do you do when you're doing a verb? It's an action, it's moving, it's going. So that's why I went ahead and used green. And so the only one that we have left is our adverb, which I've highlighted here in orange. Can anybody tell me what maybe this adverb is doing in the sentence based off what we kind of went over in the beginning in our objective? Julio. Good. I see. That's a good connection to make. I see you mentioned that ran, the verb, and quickly are right next to each other. Okay, that sounds like a good idea, good starting point. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at our next example. Okay. So George barely made it to school. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and label our sentence. George is our pronoun. And I use gray for our nouns because nouns are just kind of by themselves. They don't really have any life. They don't have any characteristics. So we're going to use a dull color like gray so we can't get confused. Okay, and what about in this sentence? Which one is our verb? Susan. Yeah, good. This one's a little bit tricky. This one's not so much of an action, but this is still our verb because it's the past tense of the word make, and make is an action. Okay? And so kind of like how we did it in this example, in this next example, what do we notice about the adverb? Good job, class. It's right next to the verb. Okay, so that kind of gives us an idea between the relationship between adverbs and verbs. So, can anybody tell me in these two examples, what's going on? What is this adverb doing for this verb? Good. It's kind of explaining and kind of giving it a little bit of more description, right? See, if we took out the adverb and we only had, if you read it just the black, it would say Santos ran home. See, we don't really know too much about that, right? It's just kind of telling what he does, but it's not telling exactly what. Steven. How exactly? Good job. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to point that out, that this adverb tells me how. Okay? All right, we're gonna look at this next one, okay? So in this next sentence, it says George, let's read it without the adverb. We're gonna read it the black, just straight. George made it to school. Okay, so that seems pretty normal, right? George made it to school, doesn't sound like anything else really happened. But when we add in the adverb, let's see what it sounds like then. George barely made it to school. Okay, and so what does that mean? What does that make it sound like? Sebastian. Good, yeah, exactly. It makes it a little bit more focused and intense, like he barely made it. So there's a big difference between George made it to school, normal and regular, versus George barely made it to school. It's like he almost missed it, right? Okay, so we're going to say this one, it shows us the extent or how much. Oh, it's falling down. Okay, perfect. All right, so far we have one that tells us how, and the next is how much. So let's look at our last example. So our last example is the car suddenly stopped. Okay, let's go ahead and label our sentence. The car is our noun, and stopped is our verb. Okay, suddenly is our adverb. And what's going on in this sentence? So let's read it normal without the adverb. The car stopped. Pretty simple, pretty plain. Let's go ahead and read it with our adverb. The car suddenly stopped. Okay, and so what do you think that makes it sound like, Selena? Right, this suddenly kind of also intensifies the situation because it's not just a regular stop. What happens when you stop suddenly? It's really sudden, right? Like it just happens so quickly and it's just uncomfortable and it's probably not the best, huh? So we're going to say this one intensifies. Okay? And so by these examples and the questions that we've had, what can we kind of maybe say about adverbs? What do we know about them? We've already made a connection between them being related to verbs and that they might possibly explain. So what do we say? Good. So we can kind of conclude that adverbs describe verbs. Let's see, I got the definition there. But that's not all. Adverbs can also describe adjectives and other adverbs. Interesting, huh? Okay, so then we can do that by manner, by how it happened, like we did in the first example. It quickly ran home. The extent, how much. George barely made it to school, so he barely made the close call. And by intensifying, by adding more. So when the car stopped and he suddenly stopped, it made more dramatic and more intense, right? Okay, so good job, everybody. We have, based off of our examples, we have adverbs can tell us how. Adverbs can give the extent or how much or how little. And adverbs can intensify a verb, intensify the situation. All right, so now let's go back and look at our objectives. Okay, so today we were looking how the student will be able to recognize adverbs and their different types, orally define adverbs, and lastly, now we have to explain orally and eventually in writing why we use adverbs. Selena, what do you think? That's a very good connection to make. Okay, the same way adjectives give life, give characteristics, give dramatics to nouns, adverbs do the same for verbs. Good, excellent. That's a very good connection to make. And also, don't forget that adverbs also give characteristics to adjectives and adverbs. All right, good job, class. I really appreciate everybody's attention, and we'll go ahead and focus on this more with our assessment to come.